We'll do a review in the Sichas in Chelek Chav Daled, volume 24. This is the fourth Sicha for the Parshas Shoftim. It's a Rashi Sicha, and Rashi seems unusually to give a reason with regards when they find a body and they don't know who killed him. The Torah gives us the din of Egla Arufa that you have to bring this calf and you have to chop off its head. And Rashi gives the reason why this is done. And this is unusual for Rashi to give a reason for mitzvahs. And why does Rashi, and also the continuation, the way Rashi puts it together with the meaning of the orfu, to chop off the head, but from the neck, from the back, how does these two things follow, even if he is giving an explanation? So that's what the Rebbe is going to explain. The Rebbe is basically going to explain that by the Egla Rufa, it says it's used as a kapora, v'nikaper lahem adam, it's atonement. We don't find an atonement done outside of the Beis Hamikdash, outside of the Mizbeach, where it's Lifnei Hashem, as this is so unusual than all the other korbanos that are brought for a kapora. Yes, we have some things which are made for a tahara, that's done outside to purify so that they can come in and do the korban inside, but a nikaper, a kapora, that's unusual. So it is so unusual that Rashi needs to explain this and say, yes, this is a new item over here. While it doesn't match the regular shechita, it doesn't match the regular place, and it doesn't match who brings it, is not a kohen, and yet this is the kapara. Let's look inside and we'll go step by step. Aleph. Beim Sof from der Heintiker Sedra, in their parsha from Eglo Arufa, in the end of this week's portion of Shoftim, in the section of Eglo Arufa, of the calf which has its head chopped. State in Pasuk, so in the Pasuk it says, V'hoyridu ziknei hahir hahi es Eglo, the elders of this city, and which closest to the place where they found the dead body, they would bring, the elders of that city, bring down that calf, El Nachal Eson, to a hard valley, Asher lo ye'oved bo v'lo yezoreya, that it's not worked over there, you can plant it over there, can work that field, V'orfu shom ha'eglo ba'nochal, and over there they should chop off the head of the eglo banochal in the valley. Is Rashi mefarish? So Rashi explains oifen word va'orfu, quotes the word va'orfu. What does orfu mean? Koifetz orpa bekufitz. You chop off its neck, the neck of the back of the animal, of the calf, with a kupitz. Kupitz is a sharp, large knife, as Rebbe will bring down from another Rashi, a strong, sharp knife that chops off the head from the calf. And then Rashi continues. The Rashi, seemingly this is another subject, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which explains why do this process. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Tovei eglo bas shnoso, let's bring a calf which is within the year. Shaloi osus opeda, she had not yet had a chance, she didn't do fruit, she had no children. Vete oref, and she should be, the head should be chopped off in an area, in a space like this Nachal Eson, which doesn't grow anything. So it's a place that doesn't do fruit. So a calf that doesn't do fruit, a place that has not done fruit. L'chapir al harigose shel zeh. That should be an atonement for the death of this one. Shaloi hinichuhu lasis pedis. He was not allowed, didn't get the opportunity to make fruit, to have any children before they killed him. So this is all comes from the Gemara, but Rashi doesn't bring just because what the Gemara says. Rashi only says the Gemara when it's necessary to understand the pshat of the pasuk. So what's the problem over here? Rashi doesn't have to explain the rationale and the reason why Torah says to do certain things in a certain way. The mokoy from Pirush Rashi Zeh is in Gemara. The source of this Rashi is in the Gemara. It says, Aber Yedua, however it's known, as in Yonei from Pirush Rashi Allah Torah is, that what's Rashi's idea that Rashi does in his commentary on the Torah is Rashi Alein Zok, as Rashi himself says, Ani loibosi elo lipshute shel mikra. I have not come but to the simple meaning of the verse. That's what Rashi's job is. Und bringt Medrash Chazal, he only brings the expounding of our sages of blessed memory, nor damos, only when it's necessary to the simple meaning of the verse. He'll bring down an expounding of our sages of Chazal. Otherwise, he just tells you the pshat of the pasuk. So, what's the problem in the pshat and the pasuk with this verse over here? Isn't it moving? In our case, it's not understood. So, why does Rashi have to add this idea? HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "Let the calf go." That seems similar. This is somewhat of giving a reason why Hashem said to do it in this way. But what's the problem? Mitzad Pshuta Shel Mikra, from the perspective of the literal meaning of the verse, is nitokin hechrech zu suchen timim of prota mitzvahs. There is no need, nothing pushes us, forces us to search for reasoning of the details of the mitzvahs, why we do the mitzvahs in the way we do them. So why would Rashi have to explain anything? Also, the Rebbe asks specifically, this is unusual language. Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem says the whole Torah, Hashem says. Why single it out here? Why does he say here the language? Hashem says. This is uncommon in his commentary by andere and Chazboris, by other similar explanation of Biyurim and the explanations when he's trying to explain things. Doesn't say Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's moving the pashtus, and we understand. He doesn't have to say what Hashem says. As an Rashi dafes nitzog, Rashi doesn't need. There's no need for Rashi to say this. But Aile Inyonim from Torah is Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because everything of Torah Hashem says. So therefore, what's the point in saying Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu when everything that is said comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Now again, this is actually the language that Rashi quotes from the Gemara. But again, like the Rebbe says, just because the Gemara says it is not a reason for Rashi to have to say it in that way. Although this is the language of the Gemara, is over Rashi b'pirusha ala Torah nit oisen to might design. However, Rashi in his commentary on the Torah is not here to quote to might design Loshen HaGemara the Medrash, to quote the language of the Gemara the Medrash creates about. So Rashi doesn't quote here that. So why would Rashi have to say this, even though in the Gemara it says Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Especially Rashi doesn't even imply that this is based on a Medrash or the Gemara. He just says Befrat As I get thereby nitzu, the word over here, he doesn't add the words, Doshur Avesenu, Kayotze Bazeh, our masters expounded or similar. So why does he use the word Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Und da ist es noch mehr muchach. Therefore, over here, it's even more evident that he's not really quoting the Gemara. Was B'hascholas Pirusha Du Da is a Mishana from Loshna Gemara, because Rashi does actually not quote the language of the Gemara exactly. As the Rebbe brings in the note, the Gemara begins Mipnei Ma'amra Torah Hevi Agol Benachal, and also the continuation. Rashi has a different language, so you see, Rashi is not quoting word for word from the Gemara. And why does Rashi bring down Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even though this is the quote from the Gemara? And number two, the Rebbe asks the way Rashi bunched up the commentary of what does it mean va'arfu, that it means you chop it off with the kupitz, and the explanation, which is really not an explanation for va'arfu, but it's an explanation for the general halacha over here. And Rashi puts it together in one Rashi. Should have seemingly put it in different dibur hamaschil base. B'choloi, from either way, in any event, Avos is Rashi mitzarev dem inyan Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu tova eglachulo. This idea that let the calf come, and Rashi combined it behemshech to sein pirush va'arfu as a continuation to his commentary on the Orf. Rashi says, what does Va'orfu means? Koitzitz Orpa Bekufit. You cut the neck or the back of the calf with the kupitz. And then Rashi continues, why? Giving the reason that the Torah says, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem says, Tove Eglo. Der Tam Tove Eglo Chulu is not of the prat from Orf. The reasoning that let the egla come is not on the detail of the orfu, nor of them tzivul b'chlolusay. This just gives you a general understanding. What's the whole idea about this bringing the egla arufa? Pravos menem b'l'shen Rashi. Why we take, as Rashi says, an egla bas shnosa. Why do we take a calf which is in her first year? Umen hargites menachalesanet is being killed in a hard valley, mokum she'enechula, place which is not fit to be worked at the sow. Visi is mefurish, umudgesh in Gemara, and this is actually articulated and emphasized in the Gemara. Neima omra Torah hevi agola aglo banachal. And why does the Torah tell us to bring this agola in the nachal? So you see very clearly that this is a general issue about the mitzvah, how the procedure is done, not associated specifically with the word va'orfu, which Rashi explains, and but it doesn't follow that va'orfu, and then Rashi goes and gives us the whole explanation of the mitzvah. What Rashi should have done, he should have made two separate headings. Rashi had gedarf stellen the zwei yonim. Rashi should have placed these two matters in zwei besondere dibur hamaschils, in two separate openings. Meitig sein dem Wort va'orfu. First, he has two openings, two separate headings. One of them, he should bring down the word va'orfu and explain that. Unim opteichen, and to translate it, koitzitz orpa bekufitz, that he chops off the neck, the back of its head with the kufitz. Und noch a besonderen dibra maschil mit die Wörter. And then a separate heading, a quote from the words, that they will chop the head of the agla in the value, and then she gives the reason. Let it come to explain why we do this mitzvah of Egla Rufa. Or they're bringing them tambas cholos pirush of them posik, or perhaps to bring the reason when he starts off his commentary in the verse. In Friedrich and Dibra Masil, in the previous opening, Al Nachal Esav, what is Mefarish Kosher Nevad. Previously, Rashi quoted from the Pasuk to the Nachal Esav, and he translates what's the valley of Esav. So he says Kosher Nevad, it's hard earth that has not been worked, and to say Amen HaKadosh Baruch Hu Tovei Eglachu. So what is the flow with bringing down the pirush that he chops off with a kupitz, and then it gives you the explanation. And the Rebbe will give now the explanation that we don't find in any of the korbanos that we learned till now this whole idea, a process which is taking place by the Eglah. Everything is contrary to the usual. The usual, you use a kohen, you use a shechita from the front of the neck, and you do it in the Beis Hamikdash. Over here, it's everything fakir. Anybody can do the Arif, as the Rebbe will say, and it's done in a Nachal Esav, not by the Beis Hamikdash, not by a kohen, done by not in the Beis Hamikdash, and which is unusual, which you don't find anywhere. And this causes us a problem that Rashi has to address it when you see something unique, totally different. Rashi needs to address it. And that's why Rashi says, Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Let's look inside base. So first the Rebbe is going to explain the usual, what kind of korbanos, so what time do we find that animals are slaughtered, are killed on behalf of a person? So you find either kapara, bracha, an atonement, or for blessing, or for tuma. Aderech harogel is nit darkei shel Rashi b'pirushei ala Torah. Normally, Rashi in his commentary on the Torah to mefarish the time mitzvahs. When it comes to reason of mitzvah, Rashi doesn't usually address that. Then there comes mitzvah, but when Rashi comes to such a mitzvah, which is totally not fitting with the rules and the command of the Torah in general. Over there, Rashi has to place himself and has to explain the reason for the change. So in our case, as it relates to bringing and shechting, slaughtering livestock, animals, for the use, for the benefit of the person. So we find up till we get to our parsha, we find many categories. We have three categories. Number one, we have korbanos, sacrifice. What does sacrifice do? Osim yonam is kapora. Their thing is to atone. K'mefurish in Parshas Vayikra and Tzav, as explained in Vayikra and Tzav, when you bring the korbanos l'chaper al nafshei. Base, another korban we bring in yonam danken far brachas, to thank for Eivish's blessings, or they're bringing brachas, or we want him to bring brachas, like you have the korban toida, the korban shlomim. It's a thank you. It's for blessings, to bring blessings. So that's another korban category for the use of the person. And number three is the korban that is brought as an atonement. The idea of that korban is to metayr zayin, to cleanse, to make the person pure. As for, by example, the bar mitzvah, when it comes to a person who was plagued with leprosy, so when he gets cleaned, the Torah says, this shall be the law of the mitzvah, the day that he cleans himself. So the pasuk says, "Vitziva hakoyin velokach lamitayir shtei tziporim chayu." So the kohen instruct and you take for the one who is being cleaned 2 living birds. So you're taking the living birds and you're going to shech them, and you're going to use the blood, and then later on that's going to be an atonement for the mitzvah. So what's the difference between the korbanos which are brought for lechaper or for a bracha, that they're all done by the mizbeach? Lifnei Hashem, those that are done lechapore are actually done outside so that you can go inside. Korbanos lechaper, those sacrifices are coming to atone, or which are connected to blessings. Werden gebracht im Mishkan Beis Hamikdash lifnei Hashem. They're brought in the Mishkan of the Beis Hamikdash before Hashem. Hamokoy Masha Yivchar Hashem Elokeichem Boi L'Shakin Shmei. The place where Hashem chooses to rest His name there. That's where you bring these korbanos as an atonement, because you bring it to Hashem to atone or to get the blessings. Was the akrov lifnei Hashem is poyel, because you are offering it before Hashem. What it accomplishes, then we will be appeasing to Him to atone for them. Or you bring in lifnei Hashem before Hashem, which is mekoid habrachas, source of brachas. So where does a korban that is coming to for atonement, for a blessing, you bring it to Hashem in the mekoim asher yivcha Hashem. That's when we talk about korbanos. On the other hand, when we talk about tahana, fakir, if you use an animal, you use a balchai to clean, it's done outside because you're not clean yet. But the 2 birds by Mitzvah to purify him is asiyos mechutz lamachna. They're made outside of the camp, which is chutz l'shalosh machanos, outside of the 3 camps in the Mokum HaMitzvah. That's the place where the Mitzvah was sent out. Shenishtalach shom b'mei chalute, in which he was sent there during days that he was decisively tomei over there, as on nitarven. So they bring it over there for him to be purified. Und können hereinkommen im Machne. He should be able to come into the camp. Und damit bringen die Korbanos bei Beis Hamikdash kaparose. When he comes in, he can bring the korbanos that are in the Beis Hamikdash to continue his atonement. The Mitzvah, he will be able to go in, and then he'll bring the rest of the korbanos. And the Rebbe is going to bring out, but this Egla Rufa, it says it's lechaper, but it doesn't have any of the criteria of the korbanos. But before the Rebbe brings this in, the Rebbe is going to point out there's other 2 korbanos which seemingly are also on the outside. But the Rebbe says the Soir HaMishtaleach is mainly inside the Avodah. And the fact that we send them away is just to take away the Avedas to the outside. That's not the korban part. And then you also have the Paraduma. So the Rebbe says the Paraduma is also for purity purposes. So therefore, but for a korban and or not for purity, so it's either the inside or the outside. But here is a kapara, as the Rebbe will bring out the Eglaruf. So now the Rebbe is going to bring down 2 more instances, but the Rebbe is going to say, it's not really a korban. That's why it's done outside. So it's not going to answer us Eglarufo. And Paraduma is really a level of Taref and Tumah. So let's look inside. The sword is the goat that is sent away is called a chatos. So, seemingly also that shneis ire izim lachatos. The Torah said you take 2 goats for a chatos. So you say, aha. So you see that even though it's down outside, it's a chatos. Not so fast. So the Rebbe says Und Choches wird nicht nikra v'gabe mizbeach. So even though the soir is not the one, the goat that is sent away, is not brought a korban mizbeach, you throw him off the cliff in Eretz Gzeira, is aber der Iker Maisa Kapore Shal Yodeh. What is the main act that brings atonement through the soil? Was das is der Vesomach Vizvado Lovaks Kola Venas Bnei Yisrael Goimer Benosim Goimer. That the Pasuk tells us that the Kohen God leans on it and he confesses on that soil Hamishaleach, the entire sins of all the Bnei Yisrael. And then he sends him away. He places all the Averis of the Jewish people on this goat, and he sends him away as Gezerah. So, but the main Avodah, the confession, the leaning, and the process, that Gitol Lifnei Hashem B'Azorah. So here too you see clearly, mostly it's done before Hashem in the courtyard. That they practically, he sent away this soil, that's just to get rid of all the Averis over there. That's not the kapara. The kapara was done Lifnei Hashem. Kapara always done Lifnei Hashem. Und das, was wird weggeschickt, let us say it, the fact that he's being sent away to a land, the cut-off place, is the kavona thereby. We're not to bring a korban over there. What the intent here is, Avekshikin Kola Ben Yisef Bnei Yisrael will try to send away all the sins of Bnei Yisrael. As the pasuk says, "When Nosa Hasoyer Olav," the goat carries upon himself as Kol Aveinosam all their sins. Aleres Gezerah to the Gezerah land. Das is aber, but that's not a pipshutish mikra. Nit kemaisakrov. That's not a korban that you, an act of bringing him. So if it was an act of kapara, you would argue, "Oh, we see that you're doing kapara outside, but this is not a krova. This is just to send away." Not this is the opposite of akra. We're trying to get rid of all the sins that is upon them, and that's why we throw him off the cliff to let us gezeda, that he carries all the sins with. So that's not a problem why it's done outside, because it's not a kapara there. On the other hand, that we find by a Pora Aduma, and over there is the opposite. Leidor Bapora Aduma, Choch as Oichas Yoso is Mechutz Lamachana. So another proof you're going to bring me that you see that a Pora Aduma is done outside of the camp, so we don't need to have a korban inside of the camp. Pora Aduma is a korban. Chutz l'shalosh machanes. It's done outside of the three camps, and it's a korban. The Rebbe said Pora Aduma is not really a korban because he's the chaber in yoneh hechsher v'hakdoma to machen the mechatos. It's there is in order. That's the preparation and the introduction. You used to shecht and burn this pora, and you took the fire, the water, Maim Chaim, you put into the ashes, and you made mechatos, and this mechatos sprinkled to be metayr. To machen the mechatos letayr metumas meis, to make the chatos water to purify metumas meis. So the purpose is on the outside to prepare for the tumah, like all other tumas, which are like the tziporim before. And once they'll be purified, and kenen makriv zayin a korban b'mikdash, to be able to do a korban b'mikdash. Just like the Metzora, we make him clean outside, and then later on he can go bring his korban in the mizbeach inside. Well, you're going to argue, say, no. The Pora Aduma is really a korban, because the Torah calls them a chatos. Yundos was a vertongru von chatos. So why do we call him a chatos? So first of all, Dr. Rashi, Loshen chitui, kipshutui. Rashi said, Ulefi hilchoisov. It is a language of cleansing. It's a chitui, not a chatos, a korban chatos. A chitui cleansing of shutel filchosov, and because of the law, kodre hakosu chatos, the pasuk, cause the halachas make it osur b'hanoah, kodre hakosu chatos loimer shi kikochim loosur b'hanoah, that it's like kochim, it's osur b'hanoah. But this itself is not a korban. That's not, certainly not in Pshuta Shel Mikra. So that's why it makes sense, according to the rule, that we do it outside. Rashi does bring down that there is a similarity, it's me'ain from a korban. That's a medrash. It's not up in medrash agoda. Rashi brings down. Because Rashi is mighty me, Soidesh Moshe Darshan. That with Rashi quotes, that was the founding in the commentary of Moshe the Darshan, the protiv in Yonah Kapora from Pora Adumo, the details and the Kapora matters of the Pora Adumo. Al af al pi as ir asiya is bechutz, although the making of the korban is on the outside, zainen oberdoi in ir in yonim ein korban, there is something, mainly it's outside, but there's something like a korban. Sidarv zayin b'koyen, it needs to be by a koyen, the paraduma. Unoch mer mitzvosu b'skan, the mitzvah, skan koyen god, not just a regular koyen. Elazar, who was the skan koyen. The shochat oisa lefonov, and you shechted before him, so there is a process of shchita. So you have a koyen of shchita, and then you sprinkle it, placing the oil moed. It has a little bit of a korban in it, but it has some acts of a korban. But contrast that, the Rebbe will continue now in Ois Gimel with what takes place in Egla Rufa. It doesn't mean any of these criteria. Supposedly it's a korban, Egla Rufa l'chaper, and yet we don't have anything that is done for a korban. Gimel, the parsha say no bet. In our parsha, however, by Egla Rufa, by this Egla Rufa, Zetman in ganzen ein Inyan. Here we see a totally different subject here. Von ein Zeit wird gesagt, as he tut over the minion from Kapora. On one hand, we say it does accomplish, it makes atonement, because the pasuk says, "Kaper la'amcho Yisrael," atone for your people Israel. That's what they say. They pray at the time when they do the procedure of the Egla Rufa. And then the pasuk goes on, the blood, the spilled blood that was spilled over there by the person who was killed, will be atoned for them. So this is not an inyan from Tara Metuma. This isn't purifying from Tuma. But on the other hand, it's done outside. Is in them nitokin dimyan v'shaychus to karbonos. There is no comparison. There's no comparison. There's no connection to karbonos. Nit in mokim, it's not in space. Then bringt es nicht zum Beis Hamikdash oder auf a Mizbeach v'chulu. You don't bring it to the Beis Hamikdash or on a Mizbeach as we would do a korban. Afilu nit noichach Hamikdash. You don't even supposed to do it opposite of the Mikdash like we do by the Poraduma. Nit benegeda isaved, not those who do the service. Sie wird nit getan durch Kohanim. It's not done through Kohanim. Now, the Rebbe cautions that, even though the pasuk says that Tzivui, Beniksha Koyhani B'nei Levi, it says that B'nei Levi will come close. That the Rebbe says that's for saying the prayer. But Tzitzach B'Pashtus Uzman for Noch der Arifa. This goes after the procedure. Who is the one that does the prayer? The Kohanim. They say, HaKohanim Imrim. The Kohanim say atone for you people Israel. But the Avodah itself, the Egla Ruva, doesn't have to be done for a Kohen. Or not in Meiser, but the act itself, as the Toke Meiser, Shchita, Zerika, Chulu, there's no act of shechting or throwing. There's nothing here similar. And if things were just to point like you're breaking off the head, you're chopping the head, oh, this is similar to Shchita. it's a sign, it's pointing to something. But here it's mashma that this is part of the procedure, according to Rashi. It's not pointing to something. So how is this even remotely connect to the idea that this is a psakorban over here? How is it atoned for? Something very strange. Rabbi adds to in the brackets, Ben Mavold gelernt. If we would have learned as the Peulos bag la rufa, Zainen blois asim that the acts that we do by the Egla Rufa are just only a sign. There's some signal. Similar to other commentators, they translate as kishem shah egla toma unikia just as the calf is whole and pure, it's clean, it didn't do anything wrong. And vakarka karka psula, and also the land is a virgin land, nothing has been done. So we're also clean because of the murder that took place over here. So this is sort of a sign for something. Is explained that they wash their hands. Simon, that's a sort of a sign. Just as our hands are clean, we're also clean from this person who's dead. If we would learn that, then it wouldn't be so difficult. And why the Eibishter is telling us to make such a sign, because this shows about something else. But our pipshuta shel mikra but is mashma. But when we learn it in Pashtus, as the alam maisim zayin chalokim from the maisa kapora, this is all part of the atonement. How come this atonement has all kinds of matters don't apply normally to a korban? So that is what forces Rashi. Is a shaila like pshuta shel mikra? The question is in the simple meaning of the verse. Dos is nit behesem. So this is not fit with the instruction of the Torah. How and where kapara is accomplished? The Torah never. That's not the way the Torah we know. The Torah always says kapara. So the question is how and the place where it's accomplished doesn't. You don't have it here. As it says, usually it's through bringing the offering to Karbanis to Hashem. And this couldn't be a korban because a korban you're not allowed to bring outside. There is a prohibition, and there's actually a liability of kodesh of things that were shechted outside of the if you don't bring it to the entrance of the Moed to bring it as a korban to Hashem, you're violating Allah, and there's a chiv koros. As muzayin, the way it needs to be, Asher Yoviyu b'nei Yisrael izimchem goymer laHashem. The Yidden must bring their offerings to Hashem, El Pesach Moed Elakayin, to the entrance of the Moed to the Kohen. V'zovcha goymer laHashem, he has to shechta to Hashem. V'zora goymer al mizbech Hashem, and he sprinkles on mizbech of Hashem. The riber is Rashi mefarish. That's what Rashi explains. Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem is saying something new. Tovoi eglo bashnoso v'ta'orevchu. Do is amira nesefes miyuchedes from the Meirish. Here we have an additional. Beyond what Hashem says something new here. This is something unique, special from the Eibishter. This idea is a novelty relative to the rest of the Torah. This is a new way of atonement. It's not like the sacrifices and not like the other matters of atonement in their Torah. Here the atonement comes through them was the Peula, this act, und der Mokem in this place, und der Korban, this Korban, seine Behesem to the Protum in der Harige. They fit the details of the killing over here. This is the process and procedure why we do this. In this case, it's different. It's not the usual way. It's different. It's in the special way here. Apizei move on. As those was Rashi is mefarish. That what Rashi explains. Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu Toveg L'chulu Behemshech. To Koitzitz Arpa B'Kufitz. He sells this the regla as a follow-up to cutting up the neck, the back of the animal with the kupitz, with the sharp knife, is nit nor val der shinu von narifo unit shchita. It's not just to point that there's a change because you're not doing shchita, you're taking it from the back. This is not an act of normal atonement. So that points out the fact that it koitzitz arba b'kufis. But also the following, well, das is a prat ikri. That's an important detail. The fact that koitzitz arba b'kufis is a main point was his machriach than pirush from Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu Chulu, which forces us and tells us about the interpretation that Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is what Hashem said. And the special laws that apply over here.